Welcome to Hood Champion Boxing and Sports. In boxing, you find a way to win or you find a way to lose. So what we need to figure out is which one of these guys, Rahman or Jake Paul, found a way to lose, and which one of these guys, Rahman or Jake Paul, is going to find a way to win. Because what's going on between these two guys is just rubbish, man. The finger pointing is crazy. It's like children bickering over who spilled the milk or who went and took something out that they weren't supposed to take or touch something they weren't supposed to touch. Now, I understand there was a contract signed, right? And I get it. I've seen Rahman, some people are saying, well, he shouldn't have agreed to 200 pounds if he felt he wasn't going to be able to get there. And I don't disagree with that. But that's not what happened here. Okay? Rahman was forced. See, there was all kind of stipulations in the contract for his weight to be monitored. Okay? Now, one thing I will say is Jake Paul and his team afforded Rahman like $25,000, $35,000 to help him get his team together and to ensure he'd be able to get his weight down. But it is hard to cut that kind of weight. Now, we get it. UFC fighters cut 25 pounds in one day, and we hear about all this craziness. You know what I'm saying? That's not healthy, man. Okay? But for Rahman, what my understanding is, he's at 215. There's a week left. And I guess it was a mandatory weigh-in. The commission decided, that's too much weight for him to lose in a short period of time, the 30 pounds. They should make the weight at 205. So there's some back and forth between Rahman's team and Jake Paul's team about the weight Rahman would come in at. So of course, it was a little bit of some negotiating strategy to kind of, shoot high as far as what he wanted in the weight. Rahman saying, hey, the commission is saying 205 is the most that I can cut down to, but I'm feeling like 215 is the weight. And it gave Jake Paul and his team an opportunity to kind of cross-examine and say, nah, not 215. The commission says 205. And either say it's 205, take it or leave it. And for Rahman and his team to say, all right, well, we'll leave it. But that's not how it all happened. You see, with Jake Paul and his team, they expected for Rahman and his team to get back to them by 11:59, the day of those back and forth negotiations on kind of refining the contract as far as that weight clause. But once Rahman came back and said, hey, look, it looks like it's going to be impossible for me to get below 215, Jake Paul and his team were like, okay, fight's off, and went and announced it. But they did that at like 8 o'clock at night when there was still 4 hours left to negotiate. So according to Rahman, he's saying, I can get to 205. I mean, it's like Sunday. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I still have 5 days or so to get down to 205, which I could have done. He's like, but they didn't. We were expecting them to come back and say, okay, well, we know you want to fight at 215, but no, the most we're willing to go up is 205, and that's it. Take it or leave it. And Rahman said that they would have gotten back to them. They would have waited until the last hour, and eventually they would have said, all right, we'll take 205. But there was some gamesmanship on their end, just trying to win that battle to try to get the weight more in their favor, because it is hard to cut weight like that. But when you listen to it, I tend to side a little more with Rahman. Jake Paul could say what he wants because he could have still made the fight happen. And this is the thing, right? Forget about what was contracted as far as the weight. There were penalties in place. Rahman was like, you know what? Forget my fight purse. I'll fight you for the minimum $5,000 purse. I just want to knock you out. And Jake Paul's like, nah. So see, Jake Paul didn't want nothing to do with Rahman in that ring. Because in my opinion, Jake Paul was going to have the weight advantage. He was going to drain him down to 200 and get him in the ring. And there were other things in place as far as that contract on what Rahman couldn't do. First was the rehydration clause. Then they wanted him to be at a certain weight by a certain point. So they just put a lot of. To me, it was like there's a lot of obstacles in that contract. Then 25%, fine for each pound that he weighs in over. So basically, man, he could have came into that fight with his whole purse just compromised. But that's part of the deal. He shouldn't have said that he would be able to make it. But it does make me wonder, why in the world would you be your highest payday, right? But why would you let it get to that point with Jake Paul where they're feeling like you are here now after you guys signed the contract and now you want to come a week before the fight and try to make some adjustments? Why would you come and make it seem like, hey, look, if you don't want to deal with me and let me fight at 215, well then I'm not fighting. Why would you even go that route with Jake Paul? Because Hasim Rahman Jr. is not the A side. He doesn't even matter in the grand scheme of things. Jake Paul is what matters. Doesn't matter who the better boxer is. Jake Paul matters. So I blame Rahman a little bit for that, but I think he had played things out in his mind, him and his team, to let's just kind of see what they say, see if they'll take the bait, that kind of stuff, and it didn't work out well at all. So now he's saying he can be ready by Friday. But I think deep down, Jake Paul doesn't want to get in that ring with him, because Rahman made a good point saying, look, if you said you beat my butt, right, during sparring, and I was 230, 235 or whatever, why wouldn't you fight me at 215 or 210? And that's a good point. But at the end of the day, we know that Jake Paul, he can't lose, not with the amount of money they have behind him, not with the plans they have for him in the future. And if that bubble gets popped, the Jake Paul bubble, I think there's a lot of people who have contracts in place with him that would lose a lot of money. So again, this whole thing about being contractually obligated to whatever you agree on, I get it. And Rahman should have been more realistic as far as with himself and being able to get down to that weight. But at the same time, he wasn't allowed to negotiate. It was like, take it or leave it. We need an answer now. I believe when Rahman says that, because Jake Paul doesn't come back to say, no, that's not true. I know Jake Paul, man, and they strung on Rahman into a situation that was lose-lose, where Rahman felt, you know what, I got the discipline, I got the pedigree, I'm from that kind of bloodline where I should be able to get this weight off, and I'll take whatever. This is a big opportunity. Why would I turn down this opportunity? I get it. All that makes sense. Why turn down that opportunity? An opportunity of a lifetime over something that just requires discipline. I may not have a lot, but I have discipline. But for this occasion, I can have a lot of discipline. And it looks like it was going that direction. But I'm just not sure about why even have that big discussion. But I know the commission was getting involved and concerned about him losing that weight. But what did surprise me is Rahman was saying his body just wouldn't drop the weight anymore. He just couldn't cut any more weight. I don't believe that, because I look at Rahman. Rahman's not ripped. You know what I mean? He's not walking around here looking like Terrence Crawford, looking like Earl Spence Jr. That is what you call a sacrifice. That's a sacrifice. The guys that lose weight like that and come in the ring shredded. Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. when he fought Canelo. That is a weight loss. That is a weight loss sacrifice. What Canelo did to Chavez Jr. was horrible. That's what Jake Paul tried to do to Rahman Jr. You can't blame him, okay? He's giving himself all the advantages in the world to keep the Jake Paul machine going. I get it. But finger pointing, man. I think Jake Paul should have at least held his ground at 205. Allow that deadline to pass, or at least see what happened when they got close to that deadline. But it was just, to me, a knee-jerk reaction to just say the fight's off when there was still 4 hours left. Now, he can do that, but at the same time, if you say you have to a certain time frame, he should have given him that. And I could see something coming up in the next 2 days where the fight's back on. Because if that was something that was written or typed in text or whatever, then that's something that can be proven. And as a result, the fight can be back on. Especially if Rahman is still out here losing the weight, especially if he drops that weight. Because you got Amanda Serrano, you got a lot of people who are training really hard, really training to get on this card, Madison Square Garden. And now all of their fights have been canceled and nixed as a result of Jake Paul and Rahman with their buffoonery. Okay? But I just can't see Jake Paul letting it go like that. I think this is more of him trying to get Rahman to ease up and then come back now and say the fight's back on and then give himself even more of an advantage, because we know Jake Paul has not won the psychological warfare. That advantage has to go to Hasim Rahman Jr. Hasim Rahman Jr. wasn't playing the Jake Paul games, and I think just a Jake Paul way of trying to get some of that momentum back in his favor. But then again, who am I? But I do think Jake Paul I think he knows what he's getting into. I really do. I think Jake Paul has the freeze ray right hand, despicable me right hand, but I don't know if that was going to be enough against Hasim Rahman Jr. But I would have liked to see this fight. I really would. Jake Paul can blame Tommy Fury, and Tommy Fury has whatever issues are going on over there. I mean, that's a whole other story. I don't know what Tommy Fury's deal is. I don't think Tommy Fury wants to fight. I think Tommy Fury's dad don't want him in there with Jake Paul. But with Hasim Rahman Jr., makes you wonder if Jake Paul just tried to stir the pot to give himself some kind of relevancy, just to come and just, pull out the fight. That's honestly what I think, man. That's honestly what I think. I think Jake Paul didn't really want to fight that guy. I think he wanted to talk the talk, but he didn't want to fight him. And what's crazy is, if you watch, Sean Porter did a video like 3 weeks ago, he said what was going to happen. He said what was going to happen. It's crazy, man. Like the man have a crystal ball. But Jake Paul, man, what does he do now? You know what I'm saying? What does he do? And the thing is, Rahman's team, there was a replacement. And he actually is a cruiserweight. So Jake Paul, man, the fight could have gone on. And to be honest with you, the people coming out to see that fight will go come out to see it anyway because Jake Paul's fighting. The opponent, it matters somewhat, but at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter when it comes to Jake Paul. They want to see him in the ring. They want to see him fight. A lot of people want to see him win. Some people want to see him lose. Me personally, I just want to see him in there with a real boxer and see what he does. But Jake Paul is kind of hurting himself as well. So quick to get on that stupid camera and say who's to blame. He's so quick to do that. That sometimes, man, you just need to leave that alone. I know that's his comfort zone, that's his world. But at the same time, I just think sometimes you just need to leave that stuff alone, man. And just, give it some time, have conversations, and don't be so quick to, at your first opportunity, to pull out of something because you really didn't want to go through with it. Like I'm going to tell you right now, right? How many of you have ever gone to buy a car or a house or anything, right? It could be fast food or whatever. And then you're about to pay, right? But then something in your gut tells you, you know what, this isn't really the purchase you want to make. And you're trying to find a way to get out of the situation you got in. But you signed a contract on it, whether it's getting a cell phone or whatever, house, car. But before the deal is fully gone through, although you signed a contract, but before it's fully gone through, or even if it's fully gone through, but there's an opportunity that arises where it's like, whew, here we go. This just came up. This wasn't done correctly. Now I can take and run with that and undo the deal and free myself up out of that obligation and go on about my business and probably go into something that is more desirable and more beneficial to me. That's the thing I think will happen here with Jake Paul. Is he said, you know what, I don't want anything to do with this guy right now. This is an opportunity for me to get out of it and then go back in it with somebody who may be a little easier for me to get a win. Because one thing we know about Hasim Rahman, just off of the strength of his dad, he has a lot of brilliant people around him that would have helped him tremendously in this fight with Jake Paul. And I think Jake Paul realizes that. They're not going to come out there and say that, but I think Jake Paul realizes that. And I do think Jake Paul's a little uncomfortable. I really do. Because if he's as crazy as he says he is, and, I'm going to prove everybody wrong, he would have fought him. He would have fought him. I mean, what you talking about? 200 pounds, 1 pound over 200, you're a heavyweight, right? And the weight limit for heavyweight is it's unlimited, right? So at 205 pounds, basically, Rockman's a heavyweight. So if you're going to fight him at that, why not fight him at whatever weight he comes in as? Why would you still try to melt him down? But I get it at the same time. That's why you have contracts. It is what it is. Steven Espinoza is chiming in, and he's blaming Rockman too. But Espinoza's going to do what he has to do because, he has an investment to protect, and Jake Paul's that investment, and, they want to be in business for a long time. In order to do so, Jake Paul has to keep winning. Or if he loses, it's got to be a really close fight with a really good boxer or someone who's credible. And I think Jake Paul's going to have to find that going into the next fight if he doesn't fight Rockman. But I would not be surprised if a couple of days they announced that the fight's back on, because that sucks for all the people on the undercard. And if Jake Paul loves boxing and cares about boxing the way he says, he's not going to, for selfish reasons, pull out and allow all those people who he says he cares about to suffer and lose out on a payday and opportunity to continue providing for their families. But we will see. But that being said, man, that's my spin on all this. The commission was involved. There's a lot of discussions that we're not privy to. I know there were a lot of promises made to Hasim Rahman to take that fight at 200 pounds. There were a lot of promises made to him by certain important people. And what happened is, once he signed the contract, those people were supposed to come now and try to affect change to where that 200 pounds he agreed to was now going to be, adjusted to 205, 210. And that never happened because they just didn't have that kind of power or influence. What Hasim Rahman was promised, and by those people who promised him, they realized they didn't have the power and influence they thought they could have on this fight and on that weight. As a result, Hasim Rahman got stuck with that 200 pounds. So he signed something believing that he had a certain people in his circle who could help tweak as far as that specific piece of the contract involving his weight coming at 200 pounds. But that wasn't, that didn't happen. Now, I'm not making that up. That came right out of, as a female talking on an interview with Hasim Rahman. They don't show her face. But I think it was his lawyer, it was Hasim Rahman Jr., and that female. And her and the lawyer were chiming in from time to time, and that's something she said. And I tend to believe that. Because could you imagine you going into a contract like this? You think there weren't some kind of conversations? This man has never made 200 pounds. You think there was some kind of conversation like, look, just accept the fight and we'll take it from there. I used to do that crap. I tell somebody, what happened? I'm like, okay, the first thing, we want to secure that spot. I used to do this when I used to organize different community events where maybe like we were doing one for the Special Olympics, right? It's when I was overseas. And there were 2 locations. One they hadn't listed it yet. The other one, the location had already been listed. But in order to be able to compete for one of the 2, you had to go ahead and register the event. So I told one of my guys, look, This isn't. We didn't want that the location that was available. We didn't want that. We wanted the one that didn't get listed yet, but they were going to. But I had to get my register the event, so I just said register the event and lock down that spot. Because worst case scenario, we take that, right? But what's going to happen is once things open up, because I was sitting there just waiting. As soon as it opened up, I had somebody who was going to let me know. I would lock it down, and then I would just move my event there. But because you're talking about like 8 months out, you know. And what happened is when it came up, I was able to work it, and I had people help me, and we got our special Olympics event moved from one location to the other. And then the one that we're at, other people who had events they wanted to register, whatever they were going to do. One was like a go-kart race and stuff. They ended up taking the location that we had locked down initially. But I say all that to say this. That's what Hasim Rahman did basically. He's like, okay, so that we don't miss out, like with me, I couldn't afford to wait and roll the dice on getting the optimal choice and then not have any opportunity of hosting the event. Well, Hasim Rahman just locked it down. He know he's in there one way or the other, and then we'll try to get what we want with our connections and networking. But he wasn't able to do it. The good thing with him is, the fight was still there. Where he messed up is he started going back and forth, almost like if I would have been complaining about the location and just making a big scene, then people don't want to deal with you. Attitude is everything, man. Communication is everything. It'd be like, well, look, this is something you want to do. I don't need you. You know, so I had to be smart about the way I went about things. How you talk to people is important. How you communicate and your attitude. Not sure what happened there with him and Jake Paul, but you already says Jake Paul don't really want to fight you. Then you come now and talk about you can't get down below 215. He's going to look at you. He's the A side, man. He's not going to entertain that crap. But at the end of the day, I think Hasim Rahman Jr. lost his right to complain because he's the one that came and did start talking about how he had a tough time cutting the weight. But gave Jake Paul the upper hand in that. So now Jake Paul can sit there all day and say, you know, it was Rahman's fault. But I think deep down Jake didn't want that fight because he should have took it. Because with Floyd Mayweather's fighting Oscar De La Hoya, he was like, whatever he wants, give it to him. Whatever weight he's comfortable at. That's what Floyd did. Jake's not Floyd, we know that. But when you want to talk about guys who are really trying to be great, it is what it is. And A side always twists the B side's arms, man. You know, they always got them by the stones. They're gonna squeeze their stones and get what they want. It is what it is. But that's where you have to earn your right to become the A side. And if Rahman would have been able to get in there and knock Jake Paul out, Rahman would have easily gone on to a $1-2 million fight. Easy, especially if they did a rematch. Easy. But you got to have discipline, man. But cutting that weight's not easy. I'll tell you that right now. I used to cut 30 pounds. I cut 30 pounds in 30 days for when I was fighting in Korea. But I was jogging twice a day, man. Like, I used to run for like an hour, hour and a half. It wasn't even distance, just time. No, it wasn't time. It was distance. Because I used to run all the way up to that damn gate, back 2 miles around the track, and go back out all the way down the bus route, and come all the way back out to my dorms. But that shit was crazy. And that was nothing. And I was eating 2 tuna fish sandwiches a day and drinking water. And I used to cut that weight. But that shit caught up with me too because I got dehydrated. I don't know if you guys ever been dehydrated. Man, I feel like my brain was banging against my skull, man. And, you know, I had to stop doing that because I was running in that sun. But I did that a couple of times. But the last time, man, when I would step and my foot would hit the ground, it felt like my brain was bouncing against my skull. And my friend, man, he was a life support guy. And he told me, he was like, man, you got to drink water. You're dehydrated. He's like, get a gallon of water. He's like, just drink it, Rush. And I was like, I can't go to the store. He went and got it, brought it back. Because I was drinking cups of water, and I just chugged it. I drank as much as I can till my body was rehydrated. And it took me about 3 days to really get back straight. Because I didn't go to the doctor and get IVs like I probably should have. I was supposed to, matter of fact, that started happening on Thursday, Friday. we met up, and Saturday we were going up to fight. We were on the road, and I was telling the coach, like, something don't feel right. He like, see how you feel when you get there. And I was like, telling him, like, man, my damn head. And we were on this van driving to the location to fight. And every dip in the road, man, oh my God, like my damn brain was gonna explode, like it's bounced against my skull. And I got in there, and I did the weigh-in. It's like 160 pounds. And I saw the guy I was gonna fight. And I knew I would have trucked him up, but I just couldn't do it. I'll be honest with you, man. And the coach was like, how you felt, man? If I get hit with it, just walking, I mean, that shit was painful. And I was like, matter of fact, I'm gonna get hit in the head, make this guy look like some superstar and shit. I was like, nah, I'm not doing that. I was messed up. It took me like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, probably about Sunday night, just drinking water. I started to kind of catch myself again. But that could have been what Hasim Rahman was going to go through too. And then he would have had to go into a fight with like that. You imagine going to a fight dehydrated? It's like what De La Hoya did with Pacquiao. Man, you just can't perform, man. That's what Chavez Jr. did with Canelo. You can't perform. It's crazy. And to know these UFC fighters are doing that, man, that's just horrible. You see some of them can't even walk to the scale, man. That's not normal, people. But anyway, I'll leave it as that, man. To me, Jake Paul, hey, he's the A side. He can do what he wants, but he didn't really want that fight. That's what I feel. But Rahman Jr. at the same time should have been real with himself. He tried to go out there, man, and play games, man. So these guys out there, man, slapping each other's pickles around and shit. And just both of them, to me, look like clowns, in my opinion. But anyway, leave your opinions below, man. The finger pointing is going to continue. But I hope we get an announcement that the fight is on. I would like to see these two get it on. It would do well. With that being said, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Shout out to the veterans. Y'all keep cool, and I'm in the breeze.